Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to the WisPolitics-State Affairs luncheon for February 12th. It's a busy time at the Capitol, so we have a good program today. I want to thank our sponsors for this event series, today's and many more to come this year. HBS Wisconsin, American Family Insurance, the Wisconsin Hospital Association, Xcel Energy, Walmart, WEC Energy Group, and the Wisconsin Insurance Alliance, which sponsors the video of this program. So let's hear for the sponsors. Come on, here we go. Yeah, there you go. So we're going to have a series of programs this month. We're going to have more than usual, but there's a lot of news going on, so I feel like we can, and you can handle that. Next Thursday here at the Madison Club, we're going to have Senator Tammy Baldwin. And then the Thursday after that, we're going to have Governor Tony Evers, who delivers his State of the State address a little later than normal on Tuesday. I want to also tell you about our one printed product a year. That's our directory, our state and federal directory of state officials and elected officials. You're welcome to pick one up at the front desk. Okay, so we're ready to get rolling here. And now I'm going to introduce our special guest today, Senate Majority Leader Devin LeMahieu. Please give a round of applause. So I'd like to start off with the news of the day, and very conveniently, there's been a lot of news, and now we can go right to the news of the day and the news of the week. Property tax relief. The Assembly and the Governor seem to be talking about some version of property tax relief, and yesterday the Senate Republicans unveiled their own. So why don't we tell me why you went with the rebate angle and what you hope to achieve out of this proposal.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me. You know, I thought I'd make news this week so I could try to fill an hour of time. For those of you who've known me long enough know that me speaking an hour is highly unlikely. So we'll see what we can do here. But I'll start back with a little history coming into this. So about a month ago, we got the good news that we're going to have a projected $2.5 billion surplus at the end of the current budget, rather than the $800 million or so that it was projected when we passed the budget last summer. So immediately, you know, we started talking with the caucus members and seeing sort of what might be their appetite, what they want to do with this money, how to get it back to the taxpayers. That's what we believe is the most important thing to do is get it back to the taxpayers. We know because of Evers' 400-year veto that there was a lot of, we heard a lot from our constituents about property taxes going up last year, but it's not just property taxes. People are struggling buying groceries because of inflation, paying their utility bills, things like that. So we had some preliminary discussions, and what's the best way to accomplish giving the money back to the taxpayers of Wisconsin. And about a week ago, a little over a week ago, I had a Zoom with the speaker, and we had caucused about it a little bit in our caucus and had some differing views of maybe what was the best use of this money and how to use it. And so last week we had a Zoom, a Zoom with the governor and the speaker. And the speaker laid out his plan, the governor laid out their plan, and what it would take to eliminate the 400-year veto, which actually made it even worse than it currently was, which I thought was a little ridiculous. And then I gave sort of a Senate plan, which was eliminating 400-year veto, putting some into property taxes, and then the rest in maybe a partial rebate. Fast forward to the beginning of this week, someone leaked the governor's response to us.
Shocking.
Which frankly was not a compromise. He called it like the Republican version, no tax on tips, which was in his budget. So I don't know how that's And then we didn't even talk about it on the Zoom, frankly. So I thought it was sort of a ridiculous response. And that's sort of where we are. I told the caucus the governor's response that he pretty much is unwilling to eliminate the 400-year veto, and we decided that why would we put a Band-Aid on the issue and bail out the problem right now for 1 year and saddle the next legislature with a huge ongoing commitment that they need to make. If you remember when we started our current budget process that we passed last summer, we had a $2.1 billion cost to continue just on MA and corrections. So saddling the next legislature with a huge investment in property taxes and not fixing the problem, which is your property taxes are still going to go up because the 400-year veto is still there. So we felt that just putting a Band-Aid on the issue is a non-starter for us. And people aren't just struggling to pay their property taxes. There's all these other issues that they're dealing with. So the best way to get the surplus, which part of that is one-time money anyways, because it's huge increases in capital gains. So that might not be ongoing. That's essentially just a cause of inflation. It's not as consistent as sales tax increases or income tax increases, things like that. So the best way to use this surplus and to get it in the hands of taxpayers is through income tax rebates. So we chose a responsible number, which is $1.5 billion, just shy of $1.5 billion, which still leaves about $1 billion going into the next budget cycle. And we'll let the taxpayers decide how they want to spend that money. Save it. They get it in September this year. It takes time to process this all. They can save it and help pay their December property taxes, which are likely going to go up again if we don't eliminate the 400-year veto.
Okay, well, let's talk about the 400-year veto. Okay, so that's obviously a sticking. Yeah,
5 minutes.
Not bad. Not bad.
55 more to go.
Oh, don't worry. We'll muddle through it. Don't worry. Okay, so this 400-year veto, which issued by Evers, confirmed, if you will, by the liberal Supreme Court, and so the Speaker seems to back off a little bit this week, and then you folks, you and your caucus say, no, it must happen. So I guess if the question is property tax relief, taxpayer relief versus the 400-year veto, do you folks say that's it or nothing?
Well, I think it's, from what I'm hearing right now, is the governor and the Speaker are still negotiating, and I have not been invited to those negotiations.
Does that surprise you? Does it piss you off? Or?
Get that mad. But I just feel at this point, if the governor and the Speaker are actually serious about accomplishing something, should they include both houses? Because it's going to need to go through both houses. So it seems like purely a political stunt, or just trying to pass something and adjourning and putting pressure on a house to take whatever they come up with.
Well, that looks like the plan to me. Like there would be something, the assembly would pass it, and then leave town, and then all the pressure's on you folks to do something. I mean, and in that case, you would say, we're not taking it up because it doesn't do something on the 400-year veto.
I mean, we would need finance to meet. There is no vehicle for whatever plan they come up with right now. There's no bill introduced. We're 6 days away from the assembly potentially adjourning. So are they going to have a committee hearing on this, whatever package they have? I mean, how is this going to, is joint finance going to meet in the meantime? What's the time frame for all this to get done without an agreement in place and one house leaving in 6 days? It's interesting since we introduced the plan with full support of our caucus, 16 co-sponsors. I've had numerous Assembly Republican members reach out and want to be the Assembly lead on the bill. And I've heard from other of my members that they've had other Assembly members reach out to them and say, your plan actually makes sense.
Okay, so maybe a little background. There's always tension between the houses, whether they're whoever controls them. Now we have, both houses are still controlled by Republicans, and yet there seems to be this tension. So you didn't say, hey, Mr. Speaker, we're doing this, hold off on your negotiations, or you didn't communicate with him about this plan?
There's been no communication between offices this week.
Okay, so what are we to take from that?
That hopefully we're here past next week to get it done.
Okay, so that was gonna be one of my questions today. Hey, how do you feel as the Senate, the Assembly meets, sends a bunch of stuff and says, okay, take it or leave it, we're leaving. Does that make you mad? Again, I'm not trying to get you to say you're mad. Does that, that seems to put you folks in a difficult position.
It does. And, we've seen this previous sessions too, where they take a bill that has already passed our House and amend it with something that we haven't taken up and essentially kill a bill because they're putting a hostile amendment on a bill that's gone through the Senate, some initiative, and something we felt is important because we passed it already, and then they attach a hostile amendment to it. I mean, it's happened before, and it's just, we feel we need to work into March, and we have session days in April if we need to come back in and fix something. So that's, in the Senate, we're willing to continue to work.
And you're encouraging the Assembly to do the same.
I can't control what the Assembly does.
So given what you just laid out here, I would say the chances of taking a major part of the surplus and coming up with property tax relief and or tax relief doesn't seem very likely. Or do you think, would you differ on that?
I have no idea what's the governor and the speaker are talking about, so it's hard for me to predict if anything is likely. But I know where our caucus is at.
So the rule of 17, that's another thing that I was going to bring up today. So for the uninitiated, that means in the Senate Republicans have had a tradition, bills not come to the floor unless there's, or a caucus is for it, 17 all. So, but you have wavered on that occasionally, and I'm wondering whether this is one of the issues that would fall into the exception category.
Well, I'd like to preface this question a little differently.
Okay, go
there
ahead.
never really was a rule of 17. It's members who are trying to kill bills always talk about a rule of 17. We went back historically and looked, and there's only been one session in the Senate where every bill has had a majority vote by the party in control over the last 25 years. And that was my first session. So this whole rule of 17 is essentially what members use to try to kill bills that they don't like. We like to get 17 members from our caucus. I've already broken it this session on the budget to pass the budget because we need to get the budget done. But last session there was a handful of bills that we used, and I think 4 or 5 last session, which was one of the lowest numbers. If you look back when Fitz was majority leader, it was common to have 5 to 10 bills that passed without 17 votes. So we'll look at each bill, but I mean, if there is some compromise that eliminates the 400-year veto and can provide property tax relief to Wisconsin families, I think we could probably get 17 votes in our caucus on that.
Okay, but there could also be a scenario that if you had a couple in your caucus who said, hell no, that you could still pass a bill that does a lot of what you just talked about. Yep. Do you care to elaborate on that, or is, yep.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. All right, so, okay, let's say, well, what else do you think needs to pass? Needs to pass the legislature and get to the governor? Like, what's on your agenda other than, obviously this one is SB 1, putting your name on it, going to testify on today. Okay, that's up there, obviously. What other things are you saying, got to get these things done before we go hit the campaign trail?
I've been doing a couple of these this week, type of questions and panels and things like that. I was asked a similar question at the Counties Association yesterday morning, and I said, I believe there's only one thing that needs to get done every session, and that's a budget. We've done that already. There are some things that I think would be good to get done before the session ends. Stewardship's one of them. As we all know, when the Supreme Court took away legislative authority over the buying of private land in the state of Wisconsin, it definitely hamstringed the ability to get stewardship moving forward, because we don't want to give a blank check to DNR bureaucrats to go buy private land all around the state of Wisconsin. However, we do own a lot of land in Wisconsin, and our caucus feels it's very important to maintain that land, to make sure there's, boat launches and paths and bathrooms and things like that. So I think hopefully we can get a stewardship bill through. The THC issue is still out there. There's nothing in state statute dealing with THC at all. Since it's sort of a new product out there, theoretically, and I know most retailers are being responsible and not selling it to 14-year-olds, but that's not illegal. There's nothing in state statute saying that they can't do that.
And then there's the federal component too,
Right.
where there's, well, I don't know, less than a year now, it would be, I guess, illegal in the United States.
Right. And there's nothing on packaging, nothing on, how many milligrams per serving, nothing on testing to make sure it's a safe product. I mean, and it's a fairly large and growing industry in Wisconsin, so it might be beneficial to get something done on that front.
All right, well, while we're talking about this, I don't want to interrupt your list, but okay, so I think at the end of the year, you said this was going to be one of your priorities, regulation, filling the gap, as you explained. But is there I guess I've lost track, is there something that's passed either House on that issue, and do you foresee that possibly happening?
Nothing has passed either house. There's competing bills. Hopefully there's a middle ground between the two bills. That seems all the rules.
There might be some players out there.
Most of the people in this room just want to see resolution. But I forget where I was going now.
Do you think a compromise is possible between these competing bills?
And yes, where it was at. It has not gotten out of committee in the Assembly, either bill. I believe the Senate, there's a Senate bill that got out of committee in the Senate. Yeah, there has. So we're working through the caucusing. That's another bill that will need Democrat votes to get across the finish line. The spectrum of our caucus on their view on the issue is pretty wide from one side to the other, so finding 17 out of 18 votes to agree on that is not going to happen. But
okay, so what else do you think would be nice, I guess, not need to pass, but nice to pass?
I'd like to get the money back into the taxpayers' hands for the surplus.
Right, okay. So I'm going to come up with my own list then. Okay, so what about the whole Wisconsin thing? I mean, again, the two houses have two very different views on what to do with Wisconsin. So explain, rather than, just explain why you folks are proposing what you're proposing.
Yeah, once again, I'll go back and go through the timeline again. 2 budgets ago, Wisconsin came up to us and had to set aside $10 million in the supplemental fund, used as matching grants, and as they raised funds their funding had been drastically reduced. There was one individual who was essentially sponsoring Wisconsin for a long time with some other
Diane Hendrick.
Yes, with some other contributions from different industries, and that money dried up. So I was a little reluctant that session, but I'm like, fine, you guys can raise $10 million, we'll set aside $10 million. Well, 2 years went by and no money was raised. So they came around again, which I really didn't want to do it again this time because they've proven over 2 years that they have no ability to raise money to do it again. So, fine, put $10 million aside again. That was July 2nd when we passed that budget.
Well, there was also an advance, if you will, wasn't it?
I think there was.
Yeah.
Yep. And so December gets here, and then they go dark. After giving them an advance, and we start digging in, and they owe money on their lease, all kinds of essentially mismanagement, in my opinion. So our caucus sort of tried to dig in, get some answers. It was hard to get answers, frankly. When we finally got them, about a month later, it sort of helped our suspicions that it's probably not a viable option going forward and not the best use of taxpayer money. So as a caucus, we're like, is this the best way to do things? We have vacant state buildings all around the square, but yet we're going to use taxpayer money to fund lease an office for $100,000 a year. Does that make sense? Is there some other company out there that can do this? Should we put it out for RFP? Do we need Wisconsin, do we need 5 full-time employees who really aren't doing a whole lot of work after February 17 in the assembly and March, whatever day we adjourn, outside of like maybe interviewing some candidates who are running for office and said, should we be using taxpayer money for that? So we felt, and maybe we are getting the best deal, maybe $1 million a year to fund Wisconsin High is the best deal to stream. Are you listening to this?
Oh,
to stream 4 sessions and committee hearings. Really? We're going to spend $1 million a year to do this? Maybe there's some other company out there that can do this and has the capability to do this. So we figure, why don't we put it out for an RFP? Maybe no one puts a bid in. But then maybe we have to decide a different way to do it. Mike, as I said during, I think it was the county's association, I'm like, my county board can live stream their county board hearings. They're not spending $1 million a year to live stream their county board. Their production quality isn't as good. But it's open, it's sunshine, people can watch. I'm sure a lot of people in this room want to keep Wisconsin High around so they don't have to walk across the street and sit in the committee hearing and they can sit in their office and watch and report back to their clients. I get it, but I think there's a better way to do it.
Okay, so in some states, the state just does it. I mean, could you ever see that happen?
Yeah, that could be a possibility. We talked to LTSB a little bit about it.
Well, you tried it one time. You tried LTSB on one of your sessions, right?
It worked.
Okay.
It was a little bumpy at the beginning. Apparently it dropped a couple times, but we can work there then.
Okay. All right, so, well, I keep asking you this, but what are the chances of the houses agreeing on something and sending that to you? Because there's so much of a gap between what you proposed and what the Assembly passed.
There is. I think that's a little less likely. You know, there's another option we could do. We found that back in 1993, JCLO voted to do an RFP. So it wouldn't necessarily have to go through state statute, through DOA. So maybe if the if the Assembly wanted to see.
I didn't put those words in your mouth.
If the Assembly wanted to see if there is a company out there, rather than poo-pooing that no one's going to do it, to actually see if there is a company out there, we could just do a JCL vote and put out an RFP, and then we could respond from that to see if there is interest.
Okay, I'm going to keep working down my list here. Online betting. Now, that's a very lobbied bill. I'm sure somebody has talked to you about that once or 100 times. Do you see something getting to Peter's desk on that?
That's one issue that we haven't spent a lot of time in caucus yet. It's really interesting. I know a lot of people who have apps that are located in foreign countries on their phone. There's no regulation over it, and they're betting on sports. You can go to the casino right now. Some of the three or four casinos in the state of Wisconsin can do it. So I think from a policy standpoint, it makes sense. I don't know if we can get it across the finish line. I don't know if the Assembly can get it across the finish line in the next week, but.
But in the policy standpoint, you're just saying it's not that much of a leap from what's going on now. So if the tribes want it and the National Online Betting folks want it, it's sort of like no harm, no foul kind of situation.
No, I think it makes sense if people are going to be doing it sitting in Lewisburg, with their offshore accounts. It makes sense to actually have regulations in Wisconsin that they're doing above board, have security, make sure they actually get their money, take some revenue in at the state of Wisconsin, hopefully.
Okay. Yeah, it should be more revenue. Is there any estimate on what it could bring to state?
I'm not sure what that is.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure the compacts would have to be opened back up.
Amended. Okay, now data centers. That's been a hot issue this year. Assembly passed a bill with some Democratic votes.
Fun issues I get to talk about.
And then they sent the bill to you folks, and actually there's a Republican co-sponsor on your side, Senator Quinn, I believe. So, and then there's some action in before the Public Service Commission, which calls into question whether any of the legislation is actually necessary. So, what's your view on data center? I don't know whether you have one in your district proposed or not, or probably close. There may be one proposed. Do you have any personal view on whether the data centers, the hyper data centers, need regulation?
So when this issue became hot a little while back, I was having a hard time understanding it. Now there's one being built just south of my district, where they're trying to recall the mayor and things like that. And
So you're talking about the Port Washington
Yes.
one, right? Okay.
yes, and I've driven by that site. It's right along the interstate. It's massive. It is so big. And you drive by at night, it looks like a city. I mean, just all the lights up, and they're working 24 hours a day. Trucks coming in and out. They're going to destroy roads in my county just because trucks are running over the roads. So yeah, I think there does need to be something done. I haven't dug into the bill that passed the Assembly yet. I believe there's a hearing coming up in the Senate. I don't know if it's this week yet, or I think it's next week, a hearing on it. There's a lot of, there's been rumors of them being proposed in my district, but there's nothing happening, so I haven't felt the brunt of it yet in my district. There's a couple issues. Obviously, we need to make sure that ratepayers are protected, that the cost shift isn't to ratepayers. I think we all agree on that. I think a lot of the newer ones they're building don't use the water that some of the previous ones done. So I think the environmental concerns are a little overblown because, and plus if they're built in Wisconsin, we have a colder climate, it's easier to cool down all the servers and things like that, especially during winter. But a lot of the newer ones with the closed water systems are really using more than a golf course. So you don't want a golf course built in your community because of the use of water. Fine. But I mean, the real challenge is getting the power there. Because we're not producing enough power in Wisconsin because of the massive use of power, which brings into question, where is this power coming from? What's it going to do with these huge utility lines running over people's properties, which can cause a lot of heartburn. So I think hopefully we can take action and provide some framework around it. I don't know that the bill that passed the Assembly needs to be amended to make sure it makes sense in Wisconsin yet, but that's why we hold hearings.
Right. Okay, so would you add anything?
In spite of that, it's really good for the local economy to build them. I mean, you're bringing people into your community. Once they're built, there's not as much impacts on the labor force in your area because they're not highly labor intensive. But I mean, just think of all the money actually coming into Port Washington on the building of it, and all the Wisconsin people who are being employed building it. So there's a huge positive economic impact. So, and there's still that local check that they can stop it as well. So I think
we've had a couple right north of here in the forest. Basically, the opposition prevailed, and the city, I think, city staff decided that it wasn't going to work, and so the plan was withdrawn. So there is still, as you say, a local check. But you think there would be that a state framework would maybe help out the locals who are faced with such a thing?
Correct.
Okay. So, all right. So, would you add anything else to my hit list there? Or? No? No? okay, so property taxes, stewardship, THC data, centers, and online betting. And I don't see that you gave a green flag that any one of those actually making it all the way to the mayor's desk.
I think we're getting pretty close on stewardship,
Okay.
but we'll see.
Okay, so there is this, half the Senate's up for election this year. Do you think your members who are out there, the Democrats are hyping that they think they can take over the Senate this year, do you think your members need to be out there and say, we passed the bill on, we gave you property tax relief, we passed the data center bill. Do you think they need that to win?
No.
Okay, explain that, because I think a lot of people think otherwise.
I think we have, people vote for candidates, and we have a compelling story to tell. We have 14 years of providing and reducing taxes in Wisconsin. And when I'm out there in the public and when people are reaching out to my offices, they understand that the 400-year veto, that Governor Evers did that. And if he's not getting the blame, it's your local school board's getting the blame. We've reduced your income taxes substantially over the last 8 years in spite of Governor Evers being in office, and even more prior to that. We've invested into healthcare, we've invested into roads, we've invested into schools. It's not what the Democrats want us to invest in some of these areas, but we have a very compelling story to tell of what we've actually accomplished. And frankly, having a $2.5 billion surplus at the end just shows how responsible we've been over the last 8 years. We started off after COVID when we got that shocking update from Bob Lang that we had a $7 billion surplus. By the way, the person who was running my budget back then is in the room. And I called him up after I got off the phone with Evers, and I'm like, you're not gonna believe this, we're gonna have a $7 billion surplus to work with. And after he got off the phone, he asked my chief of staff if I was actually understood numbers, because he didn't believe me. Actually, I'm very good with numbers, I understand that. That's one of my stronger skills. And so, we've been very responsible since then, not sticking $7 billion into ongoing expenses and causing shortfalls for the future, investing some of that in one time, doing tax relief, which even though the Fiscal Bureau refuses to score anything dynamically, it does it all statically, we continue to reduce taxes and our revenues continue to go up because we're making a better economy here in Wisconsin. And we have good candidates running.
Okay, so, because I think that's an important component, because it seems to be the opposite kind of theory in the assembly, like, we need to give our folks cover on tough issues. And so, maybe that's just a political cliche, I'll leave that up to you to determine that, but it's sort of like, when your candidates are out there and voters would say, hey, but there's a big surplus there, why didn't we get it back? Their answer is, well, they didn't like our plan. Is that a good enough answer?
I don't think they're going to be asked that question directly. If you go, yes, there's a news story right now that we have a surplus, and maybe that will be the opposition ads running. Maybe, but if I would go and ask 100 random normal individuals in my district, does the state have a surplus or not? Maybe a few of them who follow politics would understand that there's a surplus. I think we live in this whole political bubble where we think everybody's watching the breaking news today, and unless I say something really crazy today, I doubt any of the Madison stations are going to carry them. I guess that's a challenge I'm putting out.
You're going to say something crazy then. Okay, so you're relying on your veteran candidates to to shoulder the load. All right, now let me, before we go to audience questions, Ever's name has popped up here a couple times. I remember early on when you were the new Senate Majority Leader, you know, you sort of worked some deals with the governor's office and with Evers. And I'm just wondering, he's going to give his last State of the State next week. He's not running for re-election. How would you capture your relationship with Evers over the years?
I disagree a lot with his policies, but I think he's a genuinely nice person. And just like I think a lot of people probably disagree with Governor Walker's policies, especially a couple in particular, but like Governor Walker really cared about the state of Wisconsin. And if you met him, his biggest strength was retail politics, going and meeting people. And when you talk to Governor Evers, you realize he's sincere. And we don't often talk, but when we do, I think he's a sincere person. But we just obviously a lot of things we don't necessarily agree on.
Okay, well, so you'll probably respond to the State of the State message. But what's your view of the State of the State? I mean, I think you were saying, hey, the state, from the Senate Republican side, made sure the finances are managed, there's been a surplus as proof of that. I mean, but do you think that the State of the State is, how would you rate it after 8 years of Evers?
Well, I think it's in pretty good shape because of the legislature's leadership, frankly. If you look sort of what happened in Minnesota when they had the trifecta for one session, they raised taxes and did all kinds of liberal policies, like immediately. Took a huge, I haven't given this home speech in a while, so I'm not going to try to remember the numbers, even though I'm usually pretty good with numbers. But took a huge surplus, raised taxes, and went into a huge deficit. We've been the firewall here in Wisconsin from doing that. But we see all around the country, there are states with better tax codes, income tax codes, than we do. And more and more in society, with people being able to work remotely and choose where they want to live, we're competing with Iowa, who's down to like 3% income taxes with a plan to phase it out. We're competing against Indiana, which has much lower income taxes in that state. We're not always competing with Illinois, but they have lower income taxes at the top. Michigan has lower income taxes. We need to face that reality that our income taxes are hurtful to keep people here. We did part of that, helped out a little bit in our previous budget, especially for retirees, hopefully keeping them around in the state of Wisconsin by exempting a lot of their income. We took that second tax bracket and lowered it, which everybody passes through. But still, if you're a successful person making a lot of revenue and have the ability to move, I heard last night that Virginia is going to put a huge upper tax bracket on. That's going to, or they're trying to with
with the new Democratic governor and the new Democratic majority.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, imagine what that's going to do to that state. Why would you stay there and pay that kind of taxes? I was reading a story about sorry, I'm going to talk about that.
Well, there's
just like the penalties of when you're a golfer or someone competing in the state of California, just what it does to an athlete.
Right. So the state of California is, in fact, the governor has gone the other way from his party on the millionaire tax. Well, you tried to propose a true flat tax, but the tax has been flattened, as you said. But you're thinking Wisconsin could do even better. Okay, so how does Wisconsin replace the revenue from that? Raise the sales tax?
It depends how far we go, because I think if you would eliminate the income tax altogether, you'd obviously have to go that low. But as you decrease that, for a while, I think revenues actually go up because there's more money going through the system. It's just how dynamic financial tax policy works.
Okay, so if you could do it, if you could wave the magic wand, you'd say, go eliminate the income tax or just make it a super simple flat tax?
I think eliminating it would be easier than flattening it, frankly, politically. But that would mean increasing sales tax by 4% or so.
Right. Okay, like New Hampshire,
Tennessee did.
New Hampshire, Florida, whatever.
Yep.
Okay, let's have some questions from the audience. Raise your hand and I'll call on you. Jim, you got your hand up right away. And did you warn him that you would be?
I gave him the golden envelope. Yes, I did.
Oh wow. Okay. All right.
I have not opened the.
I'm gonna trust you on
Is
this
there like a
one.
wad of cash in there?
Well, no, we don't do that. We don't do that here, so just because Wisconsin I is.
Right. So my
Okay,
question
go ahead.
is, 30 to 50% of the 4K to third graders in your district read below the 25th percentile nationally. It's just, our state's a disaster from a literacy perspective. How many people know this in your district, bring it up, and think about doing something about it? This is data from Act 20. Does it come up? People think about it?
Can you ask me that question?
Yeah, 30 to 50% of 4K to third graders in your district, Sheboygan up to Manitowoc and west,
Okay.
read below the 25th percentile nationally. This is from the Act 20 early literacy screener data, which DPI released on the Sunday after Thanksgiving. And as I've talked to people, very few people are aware. And it sort of shocks me, actually.
Okay, you're not saying his district stands out, you're saying it's a statewide problem.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
Okay.
But do people talk about it?
Okay,
Maybe
well,
no.
how would you respond?
I think what you find out when you've done this job long enough is people think K-12 education needs to be improved, but yet think their own school is the best.
Of course.
Sort of like their congressman.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They don't like paying taxes for kids in school, but yet they want to have the nicest athletic facilities. It's sort of a paradox that we deal with. But I think more people know than you think. I think when you look back during COVID, when schools were shut down and parents were trying to help their kids learn and saw what was in their curriculum and what was being taught, there was a huge exodus from K-12 into private schools because parents realized that, oh my goodness, this is what they're teaching our kids, really? And I think it's probably helped some schools improve. There's been some reform on school boards around the state with people trying to hold their schools accountable. And I think I actually do have some very good school districts in my district and some maybe not as good in my district. We'll start naming them off. I think the top rated. Kohler, I think, is top rated in the state, and some other very good ones. But no, yeah, it's something that's why we passed Act 1 and why we need to continue to work on improving standards, why we tried to reinstate the cut scores, or I don't know if I'm using that terminology right, but the lowering of standards by DPI to try to hold schools accountable.
Well, it's too early to say whether Act 20 is working, right? But that was an impetus for passing Act 20. All right, we're going to go back here.
Hi, Rebecca with Wisconsin Cheesemakers Association. The federal government's issued mandates to states, right, to backfill costs of administrative work associated with food share for their SNAP programs. In Wisconsin, DHS has said we need $69 million. This is important to my industry because it's an economic driver. It's 8 to 10% of all purchases in food share or dairy. Do you see the legislature addressing this issue in a way that can ensure that we don't have a budget repair bill later in the year, and that we don't see a disruption to benefits or disruption in the marketplace.
Yep, that should have maybe been one of the bills I talked about earlier as well.
It's my fault, I didn't have it on my list.
There's
I had it on mine.
Okay.
There's different components to the $69 million request for DHS. I think the most important one that we need to do is backfill the counties, because the counties, those who are into the weeds on this issue, DHS oversees the SNAP program in Milwaukee, and then there's consortia over the rest of the state that's funded by the counties. Part of it through federal funds. So part of those federal funds were cut to the counties, and they don't actually have to do this. And their funding ends October of this year. So that's the first thing we need to do, is make sure that we backfill that funding for the counties. Otherwise, the state's going to be paying for it anyways. So, and the consortia do a great job of doing their checking. I think the part where we have concerns with is the 57 positions at DHS. They probably do need some more positions. We've been reaching out to our federal representatives as well, because they made sort of verifying these cases to keep the error rate down more difficult, because we can't do it by phone anymore. It has to be in person or by Zoom or something like that, I believe. So it makes it much more difficult to actually keep our error rate down. Currently, the state's still under the 6%, but barely. It's still marginal. The good thing we have going for us in Wisconsin is DHS does a much better job than a lot of other states around the nation who are really going to get hit coming up here. But no, we definitely need to backfill the counties, and whether or not we give them 57 positions or some positions to try help with this verification problem. But that's something we're working on to get done here too.
Thank you.
Okay, Rolf, did you still want to ask a question?
Oh, I was just going to ask about that surplus. Do you think that surplus will continue in the future, or was there just a freak event that caused it?
So I think it was about 500 million of it was a result of capital gains tax, which I don't know is predictable going into the future, because who knows if as many businesses or whatever caused that jump is going to continue happening. I don't think the sales tax revenue and income tax revenue increases show the economy being the strongest going forward. Which is another reason to not put $1 billion into ongoing expenses and do a one-time check, so we don't have future problems.
Right, so the current surplus is $2.5 billion, right? And then your proposal for the rebase is $1.5 billion.
Correct.
What's supposed to happen with the rest?
Well, when we passed our original budget, we had an $800 million projected surplus.
So it's good to have the safety valve there, is what you're saying. All right, somebody way in the back had a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, hey there. My name is Brittany Bullock. I'm with All Voting is Local. It's nice to see you, sir. Thank you for being here. Over the years,
Speak up a tad.
Over the years, you've expressed support for a Monday processing bill to, common sense way to help reduce bottleneck on election day, help clerks do their jobs more effectively, and just instill greater confidence in our elections here in Wisconsin. We know there's currently not a standing elections committee, which makes bringing election-related bills a little bit trickier to the Senate for vote. So I'm just wondering, Senator, is this something that is still a priority to you? And if so, is this something that you would be committed to bringing to your party, so they can have a vote on this before the legislature adjourns and voters have an idea on where you stand on the issue of Monday processing?
So I didn't catch where you're from, but
All Voting is Local.
okay, thank you. So I think what could instill confidence in voters is if the city of Madison would count absentee ballots. If the city of Milwaukee would have to restart counting absentee ballots at 11 a.m. on election day because they realized that they were doing it wrong. But I've been supportive of Monday count. But theoretically, the city or Milwaukee could figure it out if they hired more people to process ballots on Tuesday. Get more high-speed vote counters. The Dane County has all their absentee ballots counted by 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And they probably have a higher percentage of absentee voters than Milwaukee County does. So there are different ways that locals can, I know people are shaking their head at me, but it's true. Dane County, they send out all their absentee ballots to the local, where there's election observers watching them feed the absentee ballots into the machines. And they have them all processed during the day on election day. So there's different solutions. I don't see a problem with Monday processing personally, and just because we don't have an elections committee doesn't make it hard to pass election bills. We have government ops committee, local government committee. There are definitely avenues where election bills can run in the Senate.
Okay, I may be
And
wrong.
have run.
Right, I may be wrong here, but I think the assembly bill that passed did not have Monday processing, and although it previously, in previous sessions had. So I think there is a bill in the Senate on this. I guess my list should have been a hell of a lot longer. Do you think that that's any possibility of that getting to Everett's desk?
I'm not sure what that bill is.
Okay, well, that might tell us something, if you're not sure. Okay, on elections, okay, we've talked about Trump before, okay, and I don't think you were the biggest fan, or maybe you even said you weren't a fan. But, so he just called it nationalized elections in certain states. I think, we talk about election integrity, does Wisconsin need to do things, what needs to be done, et cetera. Do you worry about the integrity of elections in Wisconsin? Do you think nationalizing them, election administration would help or hurt?
I don't think we should nationalize elections. That should be up to the states. I think we do a fairly good job in Wisconsin. We have 1,800 different municipalities who have trained clerks. We have a lot of oversight over the system. I think there's some things we could do to enhance security a little bit. There are some things the federal government could do, like require an ID to vote, things like that, which I think would secure elections nationwide. But just federalizing our elections, I think it's unconstitutional. I think it's
Just
against the
little thing.
Constitution. But yeah, if you're conservative and you want that done, you're happy when conservatives nationalize it. If you're liberal and it's nationalized and they make changes, you're not going to be happy about the changes that might be made. So I think it's maybe not the slope that we want to go down, because also the Democrats all take control. We could have all mail out ballots to everybody over the age of 18, which would be a nightmare and be all kinds of fraud. So having the federal government tell us how to run our elections, I think there's some things we can do to improve Wisconsin elections. We'll need a different governor to do that. But I don't, like all things, I think a state can handle it better than the federal government in not just elections, in many areas.
Okay, so we're going to end a little early so you can get to your hearing and testify on your bill. Remember the directory, remember our sponsors, HB Strategies, American Family Insurance, Wisconsin Hospital Association, our new sponsor, welcome WHA, Xcel Energy, Walmart, WEC Energy Group, and the Wisconsin Insurance Alliance for sponsoring the video. So let's hear it for Senator LeMahieu.